I was seasoning a ribeye when the house went dead quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring, and I knew it wasn't a breaker the second I stepped outside and saw my front yard carved open like a trench. Orange conduit yanked up 3 guys in neon vests standing around my severed power line like it was scrap metal, for the taking one of them filming on his phone like it was funny. And when I asked who told them to dig there, the oldest shrugged and said the HOA president did. Shared utility space, routine, maintenance. And that's how I met the line between ordinary trouble and the kind that changes a neighborhood. My name's Avery Blake. Cedar Hollow, Maple Ridge, Arizona. 9 pretty quiet years until spring, when a woman named Colleen Hart slid into the board president's seat on a platform of restoring standards, which in practice meant 6 a.m., Knox visor camera blinking red, and citations tucked under doormats with no signature. You could read, and that night, while my steak went cold, I found a paper that said, "Civil infraction, interference with HOA maintenance, $500 due in 10 days, or amenities suspended." And I felt that thin, buzzing anger, the kind that says someone with a clipboard thinks you won't push back. I used to climb poles for a utility contractor until my back told me to sit down, so I know a private service lateral. When I see one, and the easement in our plat is 8 feet from the curb, period, my line runs 26 feet across my yard. Nowhere near that. So I called Sonoran Electric and Water, and a tech named Jamil showed up with dust on his boots, pulled a tape, snapped photos, tagged the coordinates, and said, "Whoever trenched here didn't just cut me off. They knocked out a relay module in the district node, and that's equipment damage." Then he pointed at the old 811 spray paint that stopped at the junction box and said, "This wasn't marked to dig. Document everything." You're not the first call about this board, and that last part stuck with me like a splinter. Next morning at 6:18, there was another knock out polite. A bang, and Colleen stood there in a red blouse with that camera on her visor, smiling like a dentist telling me we could avoid a lien if I settled my fines today. Improper tool storage, unapproved hose holder. And I actually laughed one dry sound, because we live in the desert and everyone has a hose holder. You know what I mean, and she made a note like I'd admitted to a felony and walked off like the scene was over. Except that afternoon, the HOA blasted an email titled "Community Safety Update," hinting a resident tampered with electrical infrastructure, and neighbors looked through me like I was a shadow. And look, I've been misunderstood before, but that little smear landed where you keep old hurts. So I sat down with coffee going cold and started a binder. Parcel survey utility marks, photos, Jamil's notes, screenshots of the email blast. Then I made a second binder labeled "Names Not for Revenge for Facts," because people forget what they say when a camera's pointed at them. Paper doesn't. A beige county truck pulled up near dusk. Diego Salazar from Development and Code Enforcement, the kind of public worker who measures twice and talks once. He walked the trench, photographed the depth, asked if anyone requested permission in writing. No, and wrote "Unauthorized excavation on private property. Permit not posted. Potential violation of 311 said he'd be back," and I believed him. But the real twist didn't arrive in a uniform. It arrived as a quiet knock from Hank on the cul-de-sac, who said Colleen fined his mother for a garden bench, with a notice that looked wrong. And he dropped a copy in my box, and the font was off, the code was wrong. The secretary line blank, and suddenly it wasn't just my lawn. It was a seam in the whole fabric. That night my kitchen table turned into a paper war room. Not yelling, not drama, just stacks and highlighters. Lila brought portal screenshots where rules changed with no dates, Ida brought voicemails, with Colleen's voice promising escalation. If her grandson's bike stayed on the porch, 2 neighbors brought fines with 2 different payment instructions. One to Cedar Hollow, HOA, and one to Colleen Hart, yeah. That happened. And I typed short, sworn statements, printed them. Got signatures, and sent the package to Diego, who looped in a county investigator named Naomi Klein, the kind of calm that makes bullies nervous, and Naomi asked for bylaws, notice requirements, minutes, financials. Then asked to see the HOA storage closet, and the treasurer. A jumpy guy named Bernard handed over a key like it was burning his fingers. And inside we found banker boxes, a rusted cabinet, a tote of old lights, and a stack of blank violation pads. And as Naomi logged everything, Bernard blurted, "We never voted on the landscaping. She told me to reimburse. Desert Vista Beautification." And Naomi wrote it down later, found no state registration for that company, just a prettier kind of nothing. When the county requested 2 years of minutes and disbursements over $200, they found gaps you could drive a pickup through, and that's how we got the first open HOA meeting in almost 3 years. The community center packed shoulder to shoulder, kids on the floor, someone dragging in a wobbling fan from the gym, and Colleen sat center table with her binder and that visor camera, smiling like a host agenda. Called it a safety maintenance review. And when the floor opened, I stood up with my binder and kept my voice low. No. Theatrics, just dates. Distances. Photos, the bylaw. That says any contract for work on a private lot requires a recorded vote and 14 days written notice. And I asked to see the vote, the notice, the permit. And Colleen didn't flinch, said, "Operational exigencies. Allow discretion and safety. Supersedes formalities." Like she'd practiced it in the mirror. And I said, "Then show documentation of the risk. Show the inspection that said my line was non-compliant. Show one thing that gave you the right to cut 24 to 26 feet into my yard." And her smile tightened like a knot. "You're destabilizing the community," she said into the mic. And a couple folks actually laughed then. Naomi stepped forward, stated her name for the record, announced irregularities in financial disbursements and documentation, including missing minutes and unlogged cash withdrawals, that her office was halting discretionary expenditures pending inquiry, and the room shifted under our feet. Deputy Morales came in with a manila envelope. No show, just straight lines served Colleen with a civil citation for unpermitted excavation and a summons regarding potential misuse of association funds pending audit. And Lila from the back said, "You pushed my mother over a bench, and you cashed the check." Yourself, and Colleen snapped, "That's defamatory." And Naomi said, "We have copies." And the vote started like a breeze and became a storm. Suspend the board, appoint an oversight committee, freeze spending special election in 60 days with independent monitors. Bernard made the motion, voice shaking. Lila seconded, hands went up so fast they nearly clapped by accident, counting. Took 2 minutes. Not close. And a deputy slid the acknowledgement across the table, and Colleen's pen hovered, then scratched her name. And that's where you think the music swells. But it didn't. The vents just sounded louder, and the projector hummed, and everyone remembered kids needed dinner and dogs needed walks. And I tucked my binder under my arm and walked home, past folks who finally looked me in the eye again. The days after were paperwork and sunlight. Naomi's team tracing little cash withdrawals, labeled event supplies, and decor that added up to a number that made throats clear. The phantom contractor. that looked like a website template with a prepaid phone. Neighbors bringing boxes of old notices. The oversight committee of regular people fixing a dog park latch and getting the pool rail repainted. And when someone asked me to run, I said no thanks. I'm a fix-it guy, not a chairperson. But I kept showing up with a thermos and a tape measure because somebody has to measure the line if we're going to argue where it sits. Sonoran Electric sent me a letter 2 weeks later. Thanked me for documentation. Said they'd require HOAs to provide easement proof and permits before any excavation near service. Laterals, I pinned it to the fridge when the hum came back and cooked the steak. And it tasted like more than dinner. It tasted like breathing out. Here's the part that keeps me honest. One signature doesn't fix the culture that lets a smiley bully thrive behind words like compliance and exigency and standards, and a new charter won't matter if people stop asking to see the vote. So I'm asking you to think about your block, your job, your school board. If you've seen power dressed up as helpful order, when it was really control, and tell me if I pushed too hard or just hard enough. You know what I mean? Drop your take in the comments. Should fines and rule changes ever happen without a public vote? Or is that the price of order in neighborhoods like ours? Tell me where you're watching from and what your HOA or your workplace does, right and wrong. And if this hit a nerve, like and subscribe for more real stories told straight. And let's argue it with the lights on.